hello, good evening. I'm Blake Berman. Thanks for being with us on this Friday night. This is The Hill on NewsNation. The commander-in-chief and the Middle East. President Trump talking for the first time about the major decision that he is facing now in that region.
It looked like I'm right about the material that they've gathered already. It's a tremendous amount of material. And I think within a matter of weeks, or certainly within a matter of months, they're going to be able to have a nuclear weapon. We can't let that happen.
Coming up, we will talk to a former general who explains why the U.S. might need to be called in to help and how President Trump is describing that possibility here in the coming days. Also tonight, a big vice presidential visit. This could happen at any moment now. J.D. Vance set to speak in Los Angeles as a federal court rules that the president can control the National Guard there in the state of California. And when the vice president speaks, you see him there on the ground in L.A. When that happens, you'll watch it along with us. But first tonight, here on the Hill, the strike's continuing today as the president again meets with his national security team. Robert Sherman with us in a moment on how Americans are being evacuated. But we begin first with our Kelly Meyer live from the White House with us once again on the North Lawn. Kelly?
Hey there, Blake. So President Trump breaking with the assessment from his own intelligence community that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. Trump insists he is right and that Iran is weeks away from having a bomb, but he didn't share exactly where he is getting that intel from. Here's more from what he had to say just a short time ago.
What intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
So this is in line with what we've been talking about here on NewsNation over the last couple of days, the divide in Trump's intelligence agencies. His CIA director says Iran is very close. His DNI said nothing has changed since her March testimony, that Iran hasn't been given the green light from the supreme leader to build a weapon. That's consistent with what I'm told the intel briefing members of Congress just got this week from senior CIA analysts. But then we did just hear from Tulsi Gabbard, DNI, on X, saying that the dishonest media is intentionally taking her testimony out of context. She says here that it can produce a nuclear weapon within weeks to months. That is more now in line with what the president is saying. But as you mentioned there with Connell, Blake, that we don't know what intelligence the president has in front of him that he was talking about today that could mean that he thinks that they are already creating this, or if this is just part of all of his negotiations tactics to get Iran to the table on this new nuclear deal. A lot of questions here at the White House, Blake.
Indeed, our Kelly Meyer live on the North Lawn once again. Kelly, thank you. So as the president grapples with this decision of what to do, or really what not to do potentially, Israel continues its fight. Our Robert Sherman live in the Middle East this evening with the very latest there. Robert?
Yeah, well, hey there, Blake. Well, the prime minister's stance is firm and clear this evening, which is Israel will keep going for, quote, as long as it takes. That's what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told reporters today, as Israel has made its position very clear that whether the United States comes into the war or not, they're going to continue to hit Iran's ballistic missile sites and knock out any threats that they pose on that front, as well as their nuclear capabilities. Now, some experts in this space have questioned whether Israel truly has the firepower or the capability in order to knock out Iran's nuclear developments, particularly when it comes to the Fordow facility. But the prime minister said this in an interview this week.
We're going to achieve all of our targets, all the nuclear sites. It is within our power to do that. But the decision of the president, whether he wants to join or not, again, is his decision.
So the prime minister there is saying that they will carry on and have the capability to carry on. And the resolve on the ground here has been hardened, as we saw perhaps one of the largest missile barrages in recent days coming our way here today, putting cities such as Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa, which you're looking at on your screen, right into their crosshairs. Major civilian sites being hit there, which the Israelis continue to accuse the Iranians of intentionally doing. And now, as the sun has set here, there are many questions ahead over the next nearly 2 weeks. And one of those questions that is starting to rise to the top with the potential of volleys going back and forth between these two nations, which is going to outlast the other, Iran's missile supplies or the Iron Dome's reserves. Blake?
Robert Sherman, stay safe live in Israel once again for us tonight. Robert, thank you. Joining us now is the Republican Congressman Randy Fine from the state of Florida, where there were American evacuees taken earlier today. Congressman, thanks for being with us. What can you tell us about those evacuations tonight in your home state?
Well, there are some folks in Florida that were in Israel and they've needed to get out. There's an organization called Gray Bull Rescue that the state of Florida has helped get out. So we've gotten a few calls in our office, but the fact of the matter is, for every American trying to get back to the U.S., there's like 20 Israelis trying to get back to Israel. It's sort of a remarkable thing. You don't generally see 100,000 people trying to get to a war zone.
You posted on your social media feed, "I am an American and I'm a Jew, and I'm damn proud to be both." Some of the context for our audience as we speak with you. I want to get your, I just wanted to give our audience a little bit of insight as to sort of who you are. I know that's not all of who you are, Congressman, but here's what the president said earlier today, and I want to get your reaction on the other side when it comes to this idea of a potential strike within the upcoming weeks.
The material that they've gathered already, it's a tremendous amount of material. And I think within a matter of weeks, or certainly within a matter of months, they're going to be able to have a nuclear weapon. We can't let that happen.
So the big question here, Congressman, is should the United States strike? Should the president authorize that or not? Where are you?
Well, I support the president, and he's got more information than I do, and I trust his judgment to make the right decision. If he believes that Iran can be stopped from having a nuclear weapon, which they would use on the United States without dropping American munitions, then I will trust him. He will drop that weapon if he thinks that that's the only alternative that exists. And what is clear between me, President Trump, and everyone else is crazy Muslim terrorists cannot have a nuclear weapon. And so clearly Donald Trump would prefer peace over war. But what he's made clear is if war is what it takes, he'll be okay with bombs away.
What about this? I don't know if it's a division or how to describe it, Congressman, but I very clearly heard Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, testify in March, quote, "The intelligence community continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and the supreme leader has not authorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. But you very clearly hear President Trump there say, "No, that's wrong."
Didn't you?
Who do you believe?
Well, I think you said she testified that in March. We are not in March. We are in June. And one of the things that Israel and others have said forever is that if they chose to try to implement it, they could do it fairly quickly. I suspect that is what has changed between March and now.
So you take her at her word that in March that they weren't trying to build a nuclear weapon?
Yeah, I think they were doing research and things like that to put them in the position to be able to do that. But I think that what has changed over a 3+ month period is they may have chosen to go into hyperdrive. Look, Israel picked the time of this attack for a reason. I think that they waited until the last minute. I think they've been clear on that. They didn't want to attack. They have waited for years. I think they saw Iran flip a switch and start moving aggressively, and that's what led them to attack. So I don't know that, again, I'm not the national security expert. I don't have all of the information that they do, but I think a statement in March and a statement at the end of June are very different things.
All right, we'll leave it there. Congressman Randy Fine, Republican from the state of Florida, with us tonight here on The Hill. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Of course, joining me now, Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Hello, sir.
Yeah, man.
There is a lot going on. It's a Friday in the summer, first day of summer, and there is a big decision before the commander-in-chief this evening. You heard the congressman there. Did something change between March and now? I don't know. I don't have the intelligence. He doesn't. You don't either. We do believe, I think most people believe, that Iran's been trying to build a nuclear weapon for not years or months, but for decades now. And that's partly what's before President Trump.
And you watch what extra hand countries like North Korea and Pakistan, the nuclear club is one that Iran would very much like to be in, because ask the Ukrainians, how's life without nukes versus life with? So for the Iranians, What's happening now tells them we really should have a nuclear weapon, because otherwise we're going to get pushed around. We're going to do this stuff. Look, the biggest difference that I can think of between March and now is that Israel has extraordinarily successfully degraded Iran's ability to project force. And when Netanyahu says to Trump, come in, join us, he's saying it after their air defenses have been eradicated, after their air force has been eradicated, after all of this other stuff. And Israel has, through the degradation of Hamas, of Hezbollah, the ability of the Iranians to project force outside of its borders, Israel has done all that work and is saying to Trump, come finish the job.
So I just want to let our audience in here for a second. You're looking live, Southern California. That, of course, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, the president, the Trump administration, got a big victory from the Ninth Circuit there out west yesterday in just hours as it relates to... Oh, are the cameras flipping away? Let's see. There was the big ruling yesterday, Chris, about the president being able to allow the National Guard, or at least have the National Guard there in California, and bang, just like that, within hours, J.D. Vance on the ground in California when he speaks live, which is right now. We will listen live here on the Hill.
The Marines from 29 Palms for being here, for serving their country and providing some much-needed security. As a matter of fact, I just heard from a couple of law enforcement officers, basically, thank you. Thank you to the president for sending in the DOD officials, for sending in the soldiers and Marines, because unfortunately a lot of these federal buildings were under very serious threat. I heard about a lot of that during my tour here today, and the reason I'm here is I just wanted to hear from the law enforcement officials themselves, the state officials, the local officials, but also the federal officials, what's actually going on here on the ground. I think there's some good news, and the good news is the rioting has gotten a lot better. But the bad news is, as I heard from everybody, unfortunately, the soldiers and Marines are still very much a necessary part of what's going on here, because they're worried that it's going to flare back up. And what do I mean when I say flare back up? I think it's useful to take stock of what actually happened in the city of Los Angeles over the past couple of months. So first of all, to set the table, we have a public official in Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who over the past few years have actively encouraged illegal migration into this community, have strained public services, have strained law enforcement, and really have offered generous benefits, not to American citizens, but to illegal immigrants to break the law, to come into our country, and to receive generous public assistance for having done so. What has that done? That has created an illegal immigration crisis, of course, facilitated by the policies of the Biden administration, and there is perhaps nowhere where that crisis has fallen harder than in the great city of Los Angeles. And, I landed, when I saw this city, when I was driving through to come to this FBI building, all I could think about is what a great American city Los Angeles is, and what a great tragedy it is that we have allowed illegal immigration and rioting to destroy, I think, one of the great gems of the American family. Now, these guys surrounding me represent the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They represent immigration enforcement. And, of course, we just met some Marines who represent the Department of Defense. All of these law enforcement officials were necessary because what happened is, in response to the basic federal action of enforcing immigration law, you had local officials and radical left-wing agitators who actually encouraged violence, who facilitated violence and rioting in the great city of Los Angeles. What happened here was a tragedy. You had people who were doing the simple job of enforcing the law, and they had rioters egged on by the governor and the mayor, making it harder for them to do their job. That is disgraceful. And it is why the president has responded so forcefully what happened in Los Angeles. Number one, because we've got to enforce our borders and get so many of these criminals out of our country to begin with. And number two, when you have violent agitators who make it impossible for the law enforcement to do their job, it is necessary to protect them and to defend them. We have to remember that the Friday that the riots started, before there was ever a single National Guardsman, before the President of the United States had sent in additional federal resources, you had law enforcement officers who were being captured and beaten by violent mobs egged on by Gavin Newsom and other officials. It was necessary to send the National Guard to stop that process, to bring some order back to this great city, and to make it possible for the people's president to enforce the people's immigration law. That's why we're here. That's why these guys are standing beside me. That's why we have close to 5,000 5,000 soldiers and Marines from the Department of Defense, it's because we've got to enforce the law. The president takes that very seriously. I'm happy to take a few questions, but before I do, I just want to send a message to all of the law enforcement, local, state, and federal, who frankly I think are suffering from a bit of a morale problem because they've had the local government in this community tell them that they're not allowed to do their job. I just want to let you know, from the president, the vice president on down, this administration stands with you. We're grateful for the job that you do every single day. We know that we wouldn't have a border were it not for your hard work and for your efforts, and we're going to keep on fighting for you and keep on standing with you every step of the way. I heard today Border Patrol officials tell me that they feel like the local government is sicking violent mobs on them when they go out to the community to enforce the nation's immigration laws. Can you imagine what it's like to be a federal official doing your job, doing the job the President of the United States ordered you to do, and have a mob come after you for following orders and for enforcing the American people's laws? I think it's disgraceful that we've ever gotten to this place in this country, but thank God we've got a president and an administration that is pushing back against lawlessness. We're going to keep on doing it every step of the way. So thank you to the Border Patrol. Thank you to the soldiers and Marines. Thank you to the U.S. attorneys. Thank you to the FBI. Thank you to all of you for doing what is necessary to enforce the laws of the American people. We are grateful to you, and we'll keep on fighting for you. Now I'll take a few questions.
We have been listening live to the Vice President J.D. Vance there on the ground in Los Angeles, just hours after the Ninth Circuit gave the Trump administration a big win as it relates to federalizing the National Guard. We will continue to listen to the Vice President there in California and continue to keep our eyes on the Middle East, where it is 1:17 in the morning, and the Commander-in-Chief has a big decision on what to do next. More of what the President said today when the Hill returns. NewsNation, President Trump saying today that Iran could have a nuclear weapon in a matter of weeks, maybe even months. This as he weighs military action potentially in the Middle East. Now, one site in Iran that is the center of the focus here is Fordo. It's Iran's most secretive nuclear facility, buried deep inside a mountain beneath layers of rocks. And because of this natural armor, its depth as well, it remains untouched, or at least up until this moment, even as other Iranian nuclear sites have been hit by Israeli missiles. Now, estimates say that Fordo is about 260 feet below the ground. For context here, Statue of Liberty, 111 feet. The space shuttle, 184 feet. A 22-story building, is obviously 220 feet, right? And Fordo is about 260 feet below the ground. Because of that, experts say that there's really only one option for its destruction, the so-called bunker buster, a 30,000-pound bomb that can only be carried by B-2 stealth bombers and can penetrate 200 feet below the surface before exploding. The U.S., the only one with this technology. It's one of the reasons why President Trump has a decision on whether or not to strike. And the president talked about that possibility today.
They really have a very limited capacity. They can break through a little section, but they can't go down very deep. They don't have that capacity, and we'll have to see what happens. Maybe it won't be necessary.
Joining us now, General Richard Newton, NewsNation senior national security contributor. General, thanks for being with us tonight. I always appreciate the perspective and the context. So tell us about the B-2 bomber, this bunker-busting bomb, and if the Commander-in-Chief decides to go forward, what all that could potentially entail.
You bet. It's an extraordinary weapon system. The B-2 currently stationed at Whiteman Air Force Base in the middle of Missouri, would fly 6,700 miles with air refuelings and be able to be in position to strike Fordo. As you mentioned, this is the crown jewel of Iranians' nuclear weapons development capability. It's deeply buried, not only with my sources tell me 2,700 plus centrifuges, which again create that military-grade uranium for a nuclear weapon, but also it houses nuclear weapon scientists deeply below the ground and so forth. And so in the event that the president makes a decision and goes with that order to strike, he would do so with B-2 stealth bombers. We carry 2 GBU-57 30,000-pound bunker busters per aircraft. And so that's the long and the short of it. But the only weapon system in the world, the only nation that can do that is the United States Air Force with B-2 stealth bombers.
General, the president made it very clear today when he was asked about ground troops. He does not want U.S. ground troops involved if the U.S. decides to go forward. What about the question of whether or not Israel, and maybe even with help with the U.S., can win this war solely from the air?
Well, that's a tough question, and I say that because, I believe what Israel's done to date, especially gaining air superiority and holding other targets at risk, such as other nuclear weapon sites, killed off their military leaders, and going after ballistic missiles is an extraordinary feat with air power. And as long as they keep their foot on the gas, I think they'll continue to do so. There are still special operations forces on the ground. There's still exquisite on-the-ground Israeli Mossad intelligence forces. So it's not just totally air power, but air power would be absolutely key and essential. I think could be extraordinarily helpful in making sure that, again, Iran is no longer able to build a nuclear weapon.
Lieutenant General Richard Newton, NewsNation contributor. Always nice to see you, sir. Talk to you in the upcoming days, I'm sure.
You bet. Take care, Blake. Thank you.
All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill. Is J.D. Vance still talking, by the way, the vice president? He just wrapped up his comments there. The vice president on the ground, what he had to say. Still to come here on the Hill, and it all has to do with this, immigration and the Trump administration's policies. Stay with us. You're watching the Hill. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, speaking in Los Angeles moments ago, where 700 U.S. Marines and 4,100 National Guard troops still deployed to tame the protests against ICE deportations and raids. This on the heels of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals handing the Trump administration a big win last night over Governor Gavin Newsom in California. Our Nancy Liu is live on the ground there in Los Angeles, as the Vice President is there as well. Nancy?
And Blake, as you know, the vice president has been at this federal complex for about an hour now, speaking with operational leaders and also thanking the Marines and the National Guard for their service here in Southern California. As you know, he addressed the media just a short time ago. As expected, he took some very sharp jabs at California leaders, but he also advocated a continued military presence here in Southern California. Take a listen to why.
I think there's some good news, and the good news is the rioting has gotten a lot better. But the bad news is, as I heard from everybody, unfortunately, the soldiers and Marines are still very much a necessary part of what's going on here because they're worried that it's going to flare back up.
And just a short time ago, actually, this is the presence here in Southern California. A short time ago, Governor Newsom posted to X a selfie video addressing the vice president directly, telling him that he should actually be visiting with fire victims in the Palisades as well as Altadena. Of course, there is also the National Guard win that the Trump administration is celebrating today, keeping the Guard in federal hands for now. So we are not seeing, Blake, a very strong protest activity out here at this federal building. But we should note that this building is far away from downtown Los Angeles, where the heart of the protests have been happening. You can see there's tape here, and really just one or two protesters at this J.D. Vance event. Blake?
All right. Nancy Liu, live for us in Southern California tonight. Nancy, thank you. Once again, with us here on the Hill, he is the Democratic Congressman from the state of Texas, Henry Cuellar, with us tonight. Hello, Congressman. Thanks for being back.
I hope you're doing well.
I am doing well. I wanted your context and perspective here because our viewers know you're a Democrat, but you've called out your party when it comes to immigration. You did it before the election. You've done it after the election as well. You saw the decision last night from the Ninth Circuit there. Here was the president's reaction today, and then I want to get your response on the other side.
He sued us for going in and for helping him. We went and helped them. Right now, you'd have Los Angeles burning to the ground. Largely, it would have already been destroyed.
So the court said that the president could federalize the National Guard. Do you think he got this one right?
I think he did. Look, the thing is, if there was a peaceful protest, that would have been one thing. But the moment we start seeing images of cars being burned and violence and throwing of bricks, then it changes. And then that's why you start talking about bringing the National Guard in at that particular time. If those peaceful protests, which they have a right to do that, but those fires that I'm looking at the screen right now, when you see that, that's not good. And I believe that's why the National Guard came in at this time. Look, I'm for peaceful protests, but anytime you start throwing bricks and hammers and burning cars and turns criminal, then you're talking about something that's very different.
I just heard the vice president say that the soldiers and the Marines are still necessary. Are you there as well?
Well, again, it's one of those things, the people on the ground have to make that decision. Again, we're going to see something that's going to flare up. I don't know. But again, we got to keep the peace. If it's one of those situations that we're not going into a situation that turns violence, then I don't think we need them. But I think for a while they're going to be there till we see what sort of peaceful protests we have. And let me tell you, those fires, those scenes are perfect campaign ads for certain people in 2026. And you got to understand, for the president, by the Republicans, against Democrats. And look, for some of us, we've been insulated because we've been talking strong about border security. But for other folks, those type of are perfect ads that can be used against some of my colleagues, unfortunately.
So speaking of some of your colleagues, here was Congressman Maxwell Frost just the other day. Here's what he said.
We have ICE federal agents pulling up, terrorizing our communities, hopping out of unmarked vans, stealing and, yes, kidnapping people, not giving them their day in court, and, yes, human trafficking them to other nations.
He's accusing ICE of human trafficking. What would you tell him?
Well, I wouldn't call that human trafficking. But look, let me say this. Look, the men and women that we have right now, they're saying the men and women in ICE that we had under the Biden administration. It's just a different policy. And when you talk about ICE, look, I support the president. If you want to deport criminals, I'm with you. You want to deport final deportation orders. I think there's about 1.5 million final deportation orders. Risk to national, that's one thing. But when you start taking people that have no criminal record, but they work at a construction, they work at a restaurant, they work at a dairy farmers. And I've heard from both Democrats and Republicans today and yesterday and the whole week I've been in the district, they don't want to see that. They'd rather have the administration focus on criminals.
I was told that you're meeting with the DHS Secretary Kristi Noem soon, if not in the upcoming days, the upcoming weeks. What are you going to tell her?
Well, we did talk about inviting her to come down to Laredo, and certainly that meeting hasn't been set up. But I'm hoping that we did talk about getting together, and I'm hoping that I can sit down. I have a lot of practical ideas on how we can address not only border security, but also some of the ICE situations that we're facing right now. But again, I'll leave it up to her whenever she wants to sit down.
What would you push back on when you meet her?
Well, on border security, look, if you look at the numbers, they don't have catch and release. This administration doesn't believe in catch and release, which I've been with that. We cannot have catch and release. So what happened is that the numbers of people coming in have slowed down at over 93%.
Yep.
So do we need a border wall? Probably not. But do we need to have river road to get rid of evasive plans, technology, and having the right policy? Absolutely. On ICE, I've talked to the ICE director, without due respect. I support ICE. I support men and women of ICE. But I think the focus should be on criminals, final deportation orders, people that are at risk. But, it's going to affect the economy when you start affecting workers in our economy.
We'll leave it there. He is Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from the state of Texas, with us tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir. Always nice to see you.
It's a pleasure.
Of course, still to come here on the Hill. Just think about what we've been talking about over the last 40 minutes or so. You've got the president with a huge decision on Iran. And on the West Coast, you have the vice president with a message on immigration. The two, I guess you could call it the big win and the big question, with the full panel on the other side.
Sunday, a NewsNation special. John Stossel, America's most outspoken libertarian, sounds off on the fight for freedom.
You need a chainsaw for this.
John Stossel, Give Me Liberty. Sunday at 7, 6 Central only on NewsNation.
If somebody's winning, it's a little bit harder to do than if somebody's losing. But we're ready, willing, and able, and we've been speaking to Iran, and we'll see what happens.
President Trump earlier today on the window for Iran to act on a deal potentially before he decides, we'll see what happens, to join the fray with Israel or not. He spoke late this afternoon on the tarmac in Bedminster, New Jersey. The president is now faced with one of the biggest decisions in his close to 4.5 years of being the president of the United States, what to do in the Middle East. And earlier today, the president wasn't out west. Instead, it was his vice president in Los Angeles this evening, J.D. Vance, in Southern California, amid a lot of tension in Southern California over the administration's immigration crackdown and ICE raids. Within the past hour, the vice president speaking, slamming those who he thought was the source of the issue.
Every single law enforcement officer I talked to today, every single one of them said they feel like the local leadership, the mayor and the governor, are encouraging these far-left agitators.
The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously giving a big win, a ruling for the president, his administration, that allowed them to regain control of the National Guard troops that have been deployed to Southern California. The president would celebrate on social media, describing it as just that, saying big win in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on the president's core power to call in the National Guard. Now, not one, really, but two game changers, you could call it, for the president this week. A W in court, but there is still a big Q, a big question out there regarding Iran and what he might do next. Full panel here with me now. Dr. Nicolai-Corte is a professor at Pepperdine University. She is the national political reporter for The Hill, Julia Manchester. Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And Carla Sands, former ambassador to Denmark and Greenland in the first Trump administration. Happy Friday. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. This one, Carla, is splitting alongside, and Doctor, sort of partisan lines, right? We have the reaction from the left. We have the reaction from the right. Set that aside for a second, because at the end of the day, this is our strongest ally in the Middle East and a state sponsor of terrorism that chants death to America, and a big decision for the president. You know him. You just, I believe we're sort of speaking on this topic overseas. Where do you think he is tonight, given what we heard from him today?
I do think this is the most consequential decision that he'll make perhaps in his entire presidency. It's going to have big consequences for the U.S., but for the globe, either way he goes. He has said unequivocally, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. So I think that he's going to try to get a diplomatic solution. My hope and prayer is that he does get there. But if there's no diplomatic solution, he's going to make sure they cannot have a bomb.
And that's the big comma but, is then how do you take care of that?
And that's what will he do? We have the B-2 bombers, the B-52s. They're ready with the bunker busters. There in Diego Garcia. We'll see what happens.
You break it, you buy it. You know, America is not happy with these forever wars. Remember how we rode into Afghanistan, how we rode into Iraq? There are a number of folks, including the president's base, that are not fans of a military intervention in Iran. And so he has some convincing to do. I would imagine that's part of the reason why he extended his deadline to Iran for up to a couple weeks. But, you know, listen, you know, this is serious business. This could reshape the Middle East. And, you know, we've been here before. You know, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said now for decades that Iran has been very close to forming a nuclear weapon, and they have not. And so what makes this moment any different than those previous moments? You know, and add to that the fact that Tulsi Gabbard is you know, her work as the director of national intelligence is really being called to question.
Yeah, there's a big sort of divide now within the administration. Even the president coming out today basically saying, no, Tulsi Gabbard is wrong. The White House is trying to push back on that, Julia. In any event, it's just part of the backdrop for the president tonight.
It is, and we saw President Trump on the ground in New Jersey making those comments, or on his way to New Jersey, I should say, making those comments today and addressing the fact that, yes, he was against the Iraq war and the U.S. invasion of Iraq. He says it's different this time. The issue, though, is that we're hearing two different things. We're hearing from the intelligence community, from Tulsi Gabbard, look, Iran is not close to building a nuclear weapon, but President Trump has suggested, well, maybe they are a little closer, so we don't really know, I think, which side to believe at this point. It's mixed messaging.
Have you ever seen a man engage in selective listening? I think that perhaps the ladies on the panel could attest that this is a problem of the male part of the species. I think Donald Trump is going to hear what he wants to hear and not hear what he doesn't want to hear. And right now, if he feels like he wants to light him up in Iran, he's going to hear the people around him, like the CIA director, who are saying, we got to go. And he's not going to hear Tulsi Gabbard. If he changes his mind and thinks that that's not really what he wants to do, lo and behold, I bet Tulsi Gabbard's stock goes way up.
That's the big question for the president. The big win, Nicordelai, was the Ninth Circuit. Trump rails against the Ninth Circuit out west, and they told him, you know what, you can nationalize you could federalize the National Guard there. I just heard a Democrat on this show basically side with that. Where does your side go from here?
Well, I think this is going to be incredibly destabilizing for the economy in Los Angeles, across the state of California. We're seeing the farmers are feeling that. But we're also hearing the president say, hey, farmers, I feel your pain. You know, maybe we should back off, from ICE raids on farms, ICE raids on hotel workers. And so this is a region of the country that is still recovering from the LA wildfires. We've heard the mayor and the governor speak to that.
That's the argument in part that Gavin Newsom is making. Here was the president today, Carla, on what Nicordelai is talking about farms.
We're looking at doing something where, in the case of good, reputable farmers, they can take responsibility for the people that they hire and let them have responsibility, because we can't put the farms out of business.
I'm going, okay, what does that look like?
Well, so the farmers do have something called the Bracero program in California, throughout the country, where temporary workers can come in and work the farms, and then they go home at the end of the season. So there's mechanisms already in place to bring in legal workers that are temporary to these farms. Now, if there are people that came in with not in that program, I think they need to go home.
This is sort of the balance for the president right now here.
Absolutely, and I think it comes as we've seen a number of new polls showing a mixed reaction to the president's, actions on immigration and really that's looking like. I think the economic part of this is playing into that. We're seeing, I think, a mixed reaction from Americans about how they feel about President Trump's immigration policies. It's something that he was able to campaign on, but maybe Americans are, switching their minds.
What's he going to do here?
I don't know, but for 45 years in this country, we've needed an actual immigration policy. We don't have one. And every successive administration, by whim, listening to the president of the United States saying, maybe I'll let you do this. I just thought about Barack Obama and the Dreamers and waving a magic wand and letting these people in and those people out. It's a preposterous way to run a country. And the people who work in that building back there should have long ago addressed this issue, but certainly they need to do it now.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Appreciate the time here on a Friday. Still to come here on the Hill, a little thing we call Friday Night Unfiltered. The key images of the week, Steyerwalt and I on the other side. Still to come here on NewsNation. Elizabeth Vargas reports. She has the very latest out of Los Angeles and the vice presidential trip there. That's coming up 7.5 minutes from now. Friday Night Unfiltered, other side of the break. First day of summer, first weekend of summer, just about upon us here on Friday night. We give you Friday Night Unfiltered. Steyerwalt, myself, our unfiltered thoughts, the images, best, most powerful images of the week. I don't know. We don't know what's coming. Our team chooses them. Let's see what we have here on what was, obviously, it's been a pretty consequential 2 weeks here in the news business. And that was something that from yesterday, former President Biden reappearing there for a Juneteenth event in Texas.
Yeah, Joe Biden does not want to go away. He does not want to go away. I'm reminded of when Hillary Clinton wouldn't go away after the 2016 election. And nobody knows how to be cool anymore, Blake. Nobody knows how to be cool anymore. George W. Bush, go back, do some painting.
George Bush,
hang out.
I'm done.
But he doesn't want to go.
We also saw Clinton and Obama this week before the cameras, too, by the way. Next image or video or whatever we have from the Newsweek this week. What is there? It was the 10-year anniversary of Donald Trump coming down the golden escalators. I was there, Chris, for it in 2015.
I heard your hit. I was sitting on set and heard you.
And heard my hit?
Yes.
I didn't know what I was going to. I was like, Trump's announcing he's running for president. Anyways, and then 10 years later, they announced this, the Trump mobile phone, the organization the family does.
They don't make it. They brand it.
Okay.
Somebody else is selling it. It's, I guess if your partisanship is deep enough and profound enough that you will buy your phone based on who does it, then happy Friday.
By the way, at that event, I took a picture and I posted it on one of my social media things saying, Mr. President, ?
Many people
I'm not saying I predicted it.
Many people are saying, Blake.
Many people are saying he's got the best Sunday show in the business. Who you got coming up this week on the Hill Sunday?
We've got Mike Rounds, who's a good one. The flags are so big. They're so big.
That was the last
They're
image.
as big as my face.
The new White House flag.
Mike Rounds of South Dakota, Sean Casten, Democrat from Illinois. We're going to talk about the New York mayoral race, and we're going to wish you right now a very happy West Virginia Day. West Virginia founded on this day, 1863. We're here for it.
All right. We'll leave it with that. Chris Steyerwalt, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.